My name is Karen. 4 years ago, I stepped into a life I thought was perfect. Married at 27 to Michael, a man who promised to carry me in his arms before we even walked down the aisle. I felt like the luckiest woman alive. He wasn't just my husband, he was my best friend, my confidant. We shared everything, from morning coffees to late-night dreams about our future. Michael always had a way of making me feel special. I remember our first anniversary. He recreated our first date, down to the same table at the quaint Italian restaurant where we first realized we were meant for each other. It wasn't just about the grand gestures, it was the little things. The way he'd brush the hair from my face, the soft kisses he'd plant on my forehead when he thought I was asleep. Our life together was bliss, filled with laughter and love. We lived in a beautiful house, spacious and filled with light. It was our haven, a place where we planned to raise a family. My job as a fitness trainer at a popular gym brought me joy and fulfillment, and Michael was thriving in his career. We were doing well financially, and we often talked about starting a family, about having kids running around the house, filling it with even more laughter and joy. Evelyn, Michael's mother, was a strong presence in our lives. From the first time I met her, she showered me with compliments. "You're absolutely stunning, Karen. Just like a Hollywood actress from the 50s, she'd said, her eyes sparkling with genuine fondness. She often spoke about how beautiful our children would be, combining my looks with Michael's charm. Her approval meant the world to me. But then, one ordinary evening, everything changed. I was driving home from the gym, my mind buzzing with plans for the weekend. Michael and I had planned a small getaway, just the two of us, a chance to reconnect and talk more about our future, about finally starting that family we'd always wanted. As I approached the intersection, a song we both loved started playing on the radio. I smiled, turning up the volume, lost in the moment. That's when it happened. Out of nowhere, a car ran the red light and slammed into my side. The impact was deafening, a cacophony of crunching metal and shattering glass. My head whipped to the side, and pain erupted across my face and body. The world spun wildly, a blur of lights and sounds, and then, as quickly as it had all started, everything plunged into silence and darkness. Waking up in the hospital was like emerging into a world I no longer recognized. My body was a patchwork of aches and bandages. The first few days were a blur of doctors, painkillers, and Michael's face, etched with worry. Michael sat beside me, holding my hand. His voice was gentle, but his eyes couldn't hide his concern. "Hey, how are you feeling?" he asked. I tried to smile, but it hurt. "Like I've been hit by a truck," I joked weakly. He offered a strained smile, but said nothing. The nurses were kind, always checking in, offering comforting words. But their eyes, full of pity, told a story they didn't voice. I knew I was badly hurt, but the extent of it was hidden beneath the bandages that wrapped my face. As days turned into a week, Michael's visits grew shorter, his excuses more frequent. "Work's crazy right now," he'd say, or "Mom needs my help with something." I understood, or at least I tried to, but the silence and the solitude in the hospital room were suffocating. The day came to remove the bandages. I sat in front of a mirror, my heart racing. The nurse, a kind woman named Lisa, offered me an encouraging smile. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Slowly, she unwrapped the bandages, revealing my reflection bit by bit. The face staring back at me was a stranger's, scarred, distorted, a stark contrast to the woman I used to be. I couldn't hold back the tears. Lisa put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "It's still early days. Healing takes time," she said softly. I barely heard her. My thoughts were consumed by fear. What would Michael think? What would everyone think? I was no longer the woman he married. Michael's next visit was the hardest. He walked in, his usual confident stride faltering as he saw my face. "Hey," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "It's bad, isn't it?" I asked, my voice trembling. Michael paused, struggling to find the right words. It's not that bad. You're still you." But the way he said it, the way he couldn't quite look at me, spoke volumes. I lay there, feeling a chasm growing between us. The man who had promised to carry me through life seemed lost, unsure of how to bridge the gap that my scars had created. He came out of the hospital room, and I overheard him on the phone. His words, meant to be private, cut through me like a knife. "I don't know, Mom. She became ugly. It's hard to look at her," he said, and there was something like disgust in his voice. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down my face. I felt betrayed, not by his words, but by the realization that his love had conditions I was no longer able to meet. I mourned for my lost beauty, for the love I thought was unconditional, and for the future that now seemed like a distant dream. Returning home was supposed to be a relief, a step towards normalcy. But as I crossed the threshold of the house that once symbolized love and warmth, I felt sick because of the suffocating atmosphere of hostility, hidden hints, and disgust. The first few days, Michael was quiet, almost tiptoeing around me. Our conversations were strained, filled with awkward silences. I tried to bridge the gap, to reach out to him, but it felt like talking to a wall. One evening, as I sat on the couch trying to read, Michael walked in. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away. "How was your day?" I asked, hoping to start some kind of conversation. He shrugged, keeping his eyes fixed on the TV. "It was okay. Busy." I nodded, feeling a knot in my stomach. "I was thinking, maybe this weekend we could go out, just to get some fresh air." Michael hesitated, then said, "I don't think it's a good idea. Maybe you should rest more." His words stung. It wasn't about resting. It was about not wanting to be seen with me. I turned my attention back to my book, but the words blurred through my tears. It wasn't just Michael. Evelyn's visits were even more difficult. She would come in, her face twisted in a poorly disguised grimace as she looked at me. Her words were polite, but her eyes were cold. One day, she sat across from me, her gaze wandering everywhere but my face. "It's such a shame what happened," she said, a tinge of something like disgust in her voice. I clenched my fists, trying to maintain my composure. "Yes, it is," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Evelyn sighed, tapping her fingers on the table. "Well, we must all move on, right? Life doesn't stop." Her words, meant to be comforting, felt more like an attempt to avoid a difficult conversation. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Then came the night that broke me. I woke up to the sound of Michael's voice. He was on the phone, his words slurred. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crept closer to the door. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. She's a different person, a monster. I don't even recognize her," he slurred, his voice heavy with drink. I stood there, frozen, as his words echoed in my head. I was the same person, wasn't I? But to him, I was a stranger, a monster, someone he no longer loved or desired. I returned to bed, but sleep eluded me. The darkness of the room felt suffocating, a physical embodiment of the loneliness that had enveloped my life. Lying there, I realized that the home I once cherished no longer existed. It was just a house now, a place where I lived but no longer belonged. The changes in our home were like a slow, creeping fog, gradually obscuring the warmth and love that once filled it. Michael began coming home late, the smell of alcohol clinging to him like a second skin. His eyes, once so full of affection, now often glinted with irritation and something darker. One night, he staggered in, his steps unsteady. I sat up, concerned. "Michael, you're home late. Is everything okay?" He sneered, his words slurred. "Oh, now you care? You spend all day hiding in this house, and now you pretend to care about me?" I flinched, stung by his words. "Michael, you're drunk. Let's talk about this in the morning." He laughed bitterly, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "What's there to talk about? Look at you. Look at us." I retreated to our room, tears stinging my eyes. The next day, I called Evelyn, hoping for some understanding, some support. "He's drinking a lot, coming home late, and he's mean," I told her, my voice breaking. Evelyn's response was curt, dismissive. "It's normal, dear. Men do these things. He's just stressed, that's all." Her words were like a cold splash of water. I realized then that I was alone in this, that my pain and my struggles were mine to bear. The worst night came without warning. I woke up to bright flashes of light. Blinking away sleep, I saw Michael standing over me with his phone, taking pictures. His face was twisted in a drunken smirk. "What are you doing?" I asked, confusion and fear mingling in my voice. He laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. "I'm sending your photos to Hollywood. Maybe you can star in horror films now, no makeup needed." His words cut through me like a knife. I lay there, frozen, as he continued to snap pictures. Each click of the camera shutter a punctuation mark to my humiliation. After he left, I turned my face into the pillow, my body racked with sobs. The tears came in torrents, for the man I had lost, for the love that had turned to cruelty, and for the life that seemed to be slipping through my fingers. Humiliated by Michael's cruel remarks and feeling increasingly alienated, I started wearing a mask at home. It was a plain, white mask, hiding the scars that had become the focus of my existence. It was a small shield against the pain, a barrier between me and the world that had turned so cold. As I adjusted the mask one morning, looking at the blank face staring back at me in the mirror, my phone rang, cutting through the silence of the room. An unknown number flashed on the screen, and with a hesitant hand, I answered. "Hello, is this Mrs. Johnson?" The voice was unfamiliar, cautious yet sincere. "Yes, it's me. Who's this?" I replied, curiosity piqued. "My name is John. I was the father of the young man in your accident," he said, his voice laced with regret. A mix of emotions washed over me. "Oh, I see," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. John paused before continuing. "I can't express how sorry I am for what happened. My son was troubled, and what he did, it was unforgivable. I want to do something to help, to make amends." His words, unexpected and heavy with sorrow, left me momentarily speechless. "How can you help?" I asked, skepticism mingling with a faint spark of hope. "I'd like to meet and discuss it in person. Would that be okay?" John's request was earnest, almost pleading. After a moment of hesitation, I agreed to meet him. Sitting across from John in a cafe, his eyes filled with remorse, I listened as he spoke. "Karen, I want to offer financial support for any surgeries or treatments that might help you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. The offer was both overwhelming and tempting. I need to think about it," I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. I kept the meeting and the offer a secret from Michael and Evelyn. Their reactions, I feared, would only add to my confusion and pain. After days of internal debate, I decided to accept John's offer. I arranged consultations with plastic surgeons, discussing what could be done to help heal my scars. To Michael, I mentioned only that I was going for routine medical treatments. He didn't ask for details, and I didn't volunteer any, his indifference a stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging inside me. On the day of the surgery, as I lay on the operating table, the mask was removed, and for a moment I faced my scars unflinchingly. Closing my eyes, I allowed myself to dream, to hope for a future where the woman in the mirror would be someone I recognized, someone whole. Weeks turned into months since the surgery, and with each passing day, my face healed, slowly returning to what it once was. But I kept this transformation hidden under my mask, a secret held close to my chest. Michael, lost in his own world, didn't seem to notice or care. The day I returned home from my final follow-up appointment, the mask firmly in place, I braced myself. Michael and Evelyn were there, their expressions clouded with disdain as I walked in. The air was thick with unspoken contempt, a familiar yet unwelcome presence in what used to be our home. Michael's eyes met mine briefly before he looked away, his lips curling into a sneer. "Look at you, hiding behind that mask. Can't even face the world," he muttered. I remained silent, the mask my armor against his words. Without warning, he thrust a stack of papers towards me. They fluttered to the ground, divorce papers, a stark symbol of our failed marriage. "I'm done with this farce," he spat out. "Sign these and let's end it." I felt a cold calm settle over me. Picking up the papers, I signed them without a word, my pen steady, my resolve firmer than ever. Evelyn, standing nearby, scoffed. Good riddance. We don't need an ugly reminder of your failure in our lives. Her words, meant to wound, barely grazed me. I had grown beyond their reach. With a small smile playing on my lips, I reached up and removed my mask, revealing my face, almost as it was before the accident. The shock on Michael's and Evelyn's faces was a picture I'd remember forever. Michael's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, her earlier poise crumbling. But how? Michael stammered, taking a step towards me. I looked at him, my smile growing. You were too busy wallowing in your own misery to notice me, to see the person you vowed to love in sickness and in health. Michael's face crumbled, his earlier bravado fading. Please, let's start over. We can forget all this happened. I laughed, not out of joy, but because of the absurdity of his words. Forget? No, Michael. I won't forget how you treated me, how you made me feel. I'm leaving, but not because you or your mother want me to. I'm leaving for me. I gathered my bag, my signed divorce papers in hand, and walked past them, out of the house that was no longer a home. Their shocked faces were the last image I took with me, a reminder of how far I had come and the new life that awaited me. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I moved into a small apartment, a space that was mine alone. It was here, among unpacked boxes and bare walls, that I began to rebuild my life. Returning to work at the fitness center was a big step. The familiar smell of the gym, the sound of weights clinking. It was comforting. My colleagues welcomed me back with open arms, their smiles genuine and warm. Hey Karen, you're back. We missed you around here, said Lisa, one of the trainers. I smiled, feeling a sense of belonging. It's good to be back. I've missed this place. As I resumed training sessions, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. With each class I taught, I grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally too. I was finding myself again, rediscovering the woman who loved her job, who took pride in her strength. One day, after a particularly grueling session, I sat down on a bench, catching my breath. That's when John walked in. I hadn't seen him since our meeting at the cafe months ago. Hello, he said, a tentative smile on his face. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. How are you? I stood up, surprised but pleased to see him. I'm doing well, thank you. It's good to see you, John. We talked for a while, about mundane things at first, the weather, the gym. Then, the conversation shifted to more personal topics. I never got the chance to thank you properly, I said, my voice sincere. Your help. It changed everything for me. John's smile was warm. I'm just glad I could do something to make amends. You've come a long way. He hesitated for a moment before continuing. I was wondering if maybe you'd like to grab a coffee sometime? No pressure, just as friends. The invitation caught me off guard, but it was a pleasant surprise. I'd like that, I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. As I watched him leave the gym, I felt a flutter of excitement, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. It was the beginning of something new, a chance to explore life from a fresh perspective. That night, as I lay in bed in my new apartment, I thought about the twists and turns my life had taken. There was still pain and healing ahead, but there was also hope. Hope for a future that was mine to shape. The dawn of a new day was breaking, and I was ready to meet it head on. The journey of life, I've come to realize, is never a straight path. It twists and turns, bringing challenges and surprises along the way. Since my divorce, I've been rediscovering who I am, but not without unexpected obstacles. Michael, unable to accept the end of our marriage, began reaching out, trying to rekindle what we once had. His persistence, a stark contrast to his earlier indifference, forced me to seek legal means to ensure my peace. It was a difficult decision, but necessary for my well-being. The day I stood in court, asking for a restraining order, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. Sadness for what our relationship had become, and determination to protect my newfound independence. Meanwhile, My relationship with John was blossoming into something beautiful and profound. He was a constant source of support and understanding. On one of our dates, as we walked along a riverbank under the stars, he turned to me and said something that stayed with me. "You know, you were always beautiful, even with your scars. It's just that not everyone can look past the surface. Not everyone can see into the soul." I looked at him, touched by his words. "Thank you, John. That means more to me than you can imagine." He smiled, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "It's the truth, and I'm grateful for every part of you." That night, as I lay in bed, reflecting on everything that had happened, I felt a deep sense of contentment. My journey had been fraught with pain and heartache, but it had also led me to a place of self-acceptance and love. I realized then that the most profound form of love isn't about how we look or what we have. It's about being loved for our soul, for the essence of who we are. John saw me for me, scars and all, and cherished what he saw. Life had come full circle, but in a way I hadn't anticipated. I had lost a life I thought was perfect, only to find a deeper, more meaningful existence. I had learned to love myself and found someone who loved me for the person I had become. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength gained, and for the love that had found its way into my life. I had emerged from the shadows of my past, stepping into a future bright with promise and hope.